Ladies and gents, welcome to the video. I'm GetGoodGuy. This is Battlefield 5 again, yay! And that's a very weird way to start a video, but I thought it would be fun to look at some of the best weapons in terms of community popularity in Battlefield 5's life cycle and track their journey through the game to see how good they were and where they are now, how much things have changed. And so when I say best, that's very subjective, obviously. So I've selected one weapon for each class that has been widely deemed as being extremely good, popular, or overpowered by large sections of this community at some point, whether it was actually true or not, and we'll go through that, and I'll be giving hard facts and stats about them with my personal opinion mixed in. You can of course feel free to share your opinion in the comments below. This is all just for entertainment purposes. So let's get into this and start with Assault. And I've gone for the very obvious choice of the STG-44. This has been a relatively common sight throughout Battlefield 5's life cycle so far, all the way through, and for some extended chunks of time it's been an extremely good choice, arguably a top meta option, and even to this day has been worth a selection for the right player and has never really at any point been deserving of being labelled as being bad or anything like that. A lot of its selling points revolve around its ease of use and familiarity with FPS gamers, as it performs in essentially the manner of any generic assault rifle from countless shooters out there, so people get very accustomed to it very quickly, and the skill floor or barrier to entry for half decent performance with it is very low. It's a great jack of all trades weapon with a manageable rate of fire, mitigatable recoil, and solid performance at a variety of ranges. Now I remember this thing being touted as being broken way back in, I believe, the alpha. It was selected by everyone and their mum and their dad and their uncle and the secret guy under the stairs that we don't talk about. It was lethal and extremely easy to use, and boom, the STG was marking itself out for long-term popularity from the very beginning. Now of course it didn't remain as a literal god gun after the alpha, but it was still very strong, easy to use, and popular at full release, requiring 4 bullets to kill inside 10 meters, 5 inside 50 meters, and 6 beyond that. And so at that point, I feel the STG deserved a B+ grade due to a combination of factors, including relatively weak SMGs at launch, but being outstripped by skilled semi-auto users. Then came the 5.2 and 5.2.2 updates, where of course the STG became less powerful in terms of bullets to kill, so the obvious assumption just looking at the numbers would be to say that it sucked at this point. But nope, because almost everything became weaker as well. Recoil was also eventually reduced to a huge degree for most weapons, and semi-auto rifles got kinda trashed by the balancing, so automatic weapons became pretty much the meta. The STG was absolutely lethal by comparison, especially once recoil got reduced almost across the board, and so at that point, in the TTK the community kind of hated overall, the STG gets an A grade from me. And so now we come to the modern day. And well, the STG-44 isn't exactly ultra top tier. Mid and slow firing autos got kinda screwed by the 6.2 balancing in terms of their potency at their optimal range, for some reason requiring one more bullet than they used to at the range where they're supposed to be strong, whereas fast firing SMGs don't at close range where they're strong, and semi-auto rifles are still super potent at their optimal range. And because of this, semi-autos are the kings again, even more so than before, and can be used in what many would consider as the STG's optimal range, at least some semi-autos. But the STG is still very easy to use and certainly a viable option for the right player, and so I give it a C+ grade, which isn't really a reflection of what the gun itself can do, but just basically because of how good semi-autos are by comparison. But with the STG still being very good in the right hands, I could see a B- also being a very solid argument, maybe a B if someone's really good, but anyway, that means the STG has gone from being an A at its peak to a very usable second tier option at this point for the right player. Next we have the medic class, and really there was no way not to pick the Type 2A. Whether it was actually overpowered or not, it became pretty much the most popular weapon BF5 has seen to date for a period of time. It was a plague. It was absolutely everywhere. It was damn near ruining the experience, and it should still be fresh in all of our memories if you were playing at the time of its selection dominance. To me, and anyone with any kind of weapon balance know-how at all, its power was obvious from the start. Firing at over 1,000 rounds per minute and having a 51 or 31 round magazine, I believe, was always going to be problematic if it was easy to use, and it was extremely easy in a lot of ways, as it was introduced to the game during the period of time where most weapons were bullet sponge machines at range and recoil was extremely low, allowing the Type 2A to absolutely dominate at close range via spraying and praying, with very few drawbacks and next to no threat of actually being picked off from afar, especially considering medic heals. else. And so while I don't think the gun itself was actually as overpowered as many thought, I still felt it was too strong, and I have absolutely no issues with giving the Type 2A an A+ grade for that period of time, because it was just way too forgiving in nature with that big ass magazine and low effort playstyle. It could indeed be countered, but it required a fairly good and knowledgeable player using the right stuff, and so the A+ grade just shines through, because for the average player base it was just dominant. But now, well, in the current meta it's not as strong. It has more recoil, which is something I wasn't sure of at first, but have since absolutely come to realise. Now don't get me wrong, it's still good, and I still think that fire rate with a large magazine is a mistake, but its overall potency and recoil now is better balanced with other options, and it lacks the capability to challenge at range now, at a time where semi-auto rifles are pretty dominant and can keep their distance. So I don't think it's been ruined as some do, and I don't think it's still broken levels of good as some do, and I think the much lower usage numbers, while still being visibly present on the battlefield, reflects this, now resulting in my current grading of a B-, which I personally think is totally fair, and I would rather use something like the Thompson, which means that in its short life so far, the Type 2A has gone from a top popularity meta A+ choice to a very solid second tier option for the right kind of player, somewhat reminiscent of the STG of the Assault class we just covered, but with a more defined role and strengths. Next up is support class, and it's the KE7, and it may be hard to work out why for some of you, but this gun caused all kinds of problems when the game first released. It was extremely popular, it was blamed for all sorts of things, such as super bullets, insta-kills and whatever else, and it was for sure good, but honestly not as good as many thought, and the network issues did exacerbate the perception of it being broken. One of those times where a weapon is used and talked about with another issue clouding the matter, word spreads, people use it more and more, and a narrative builds up. It was of course strong though, there's no denying that, and I believe it actually received a nerf in the end because of this, but all networking issues aside, I feel it deserved a B+ back then, at most, to be honest with you. It was very good for the average player base, but when analysed in depth by knowledgeable people, it was kind of lacking in some ways, and overall semi-autos were still the actual dominant force if you played in a suitable manner. And then since the point of that nerf and shifting opinions, the KE7 has never really climbed back to the top of the mountain. Not particularly special during the 5.2 and 5.2.2 days, and there's nothing really mind-blowing about it now. Actually, honestly, it's a pretty unpopular option within a fairly unpopular weapon type at this point, lacking the potency to really challenge semi-autos at mid-range, also having a smaller magazine than something like the more versatile STG-44 that we covered, plus being in a less popular class, lacking the potency to challenge very CQC orientated SMGs at their desired range, also lacking the usability factor of even something like the Sten, which feels like it basically doesn't recoil, and of course not having the option of a massive magazine like the Lewis gun to mitigate the deficiencies of that weapon type now, meaning that despite having some decent kill times at some ranges, undeniably, it just doesn't offer enough overall, reflected in how few of them you now see. And so we now come to the Recon class, and honestly this one can be really quick. No Recon weapon has really received a large amount of complaints or noticeably high overall usage aside from the ZH-29. I believe I remember Stardate talking about how strong this gun was way back before the full release of the game, and it really has been a monster, but only for the right player. It's one of those guns where people complain about it all the time, yet it never becomes a weapon that truly dominates overall usage, because it's not actually as simple to use as many think in a versatile manner. It's not particularly forgiving. Sure, it's extremely strong when used well and in the right circumstance, but the latter part of that sentence is of paramount importance. Regardless, this weapon hasn't risen or fallen a huge amount throughout the game, as it hasn't changed all that much. It was very good, and I give it probably a B+ to A-. Then it got its rate of fire dropped, and so it became probably a B-/B, and now it's back to where it was, but with super good semi-autos again as competition, so it now selected at a very solid B+. I think that's fair. And so that's my rundown of the so-called best weapons BF5 has seen and where they are now, at least in my opinion. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. And I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, leaving a like is massive for me. It really helps the channel to grow, and I appreciate it so much. If you're new here, please do consider subscribing and maybe turning on notifications to stay up to date with the massive amount of content I've been putting out and will continue to put out. And all the links to my social media, including Patreon, can be found in the description and my pinned comment. Here is the Board of Awesome for the epic people who already support me on Patreon. They're all absolute heroes, and I love them all deeply and of course, often. If you want to join them on the Board of Awesome, the link to the Patreon page is in the description and my pinned comment. And with that all said, I'm GetGoodGuy, and I'll see you next time. Laters. bugs, and I could go on. The only upside would be if that makes Battlefield 6 awesome when it comes out, and that would help to save the series. I, and many of you, don't want to see this series die. The next one has to be great, it has to not be flawed like this game, not have all the PR issues of this game, and, a big one, not released in a bad state.